On this episode of Dollars and Cents Spare Change, we're going to talk about relationships from start to finish, the financial goals and conversations that go along with that. Start from dating into marriage, planning for honeymoons, weddings, retirement plans, and shared financial goals. Let's get into it. Today, we are talking about couples finance. Candy, the Director of Community Engagement here at Hapo Community Credit Union, is sitting in with me. And we are going to talk through the stages of relationships and how couples can work through their financial goals together to help remove financial stress from relationships and kind of work us through how that goes. Candy, welcome. And let's get started right out of the gate. One night stands. We're definitely talking about, people are dating. When is the appropriate time to start talking about finances and money?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me back, Scott. It's been a long time, so good to be back, first of all. This one's going to be a fun one. Let's see. So when it comes to talking about finances, there's never a bad time. So I would say any time is good to talk about it, any stage. With young love, new love, of course, I know it might be a little tricky, in figuring out like when is the right time to start that
We've
introduction.
been on a first date, probably not necessarily the right time, but after maybe a couple of months, you're getting a little bit more serious, might be the right time to start having those bigger relationship goal conversations, and finance should definitely be one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want to ask someone for their credit score on the first date, that'll just be kind of weird, but good info, but at the right time. So yeah, when it comes to, that stage and when everything's official, that you're going the same direction, I would say that the first thing would be to focus on the communication and to just be very open about your finances and just to touch on a couple certain things when it comes to finances, and whatever you do, just don't avoid it.
Yeah.
That doesn't work, unfortunately. So
not with any relationship. Avoiding problems typically will make them worse, or avoiding topics is going to make those topics a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, definitely talk about it. I would say first, maybe start with talking about some of your goals when it comes to finance. And when I say finance, that encompasses a number of different items, such as like income, your expenses, the debt that you might have, because that's important information to have and to know. And maybe start introducing that conversation also around like credit. Because if you have a plan or a goal to maybe, let's say, buy a home sooner than later, those kind of things are important to know, because then you can come together and make a game plan and start working towards that goal, knowing where you're starting, like where you're both starting, and having that clarity from the very beginning is very helpful in just guiding that path and what that's going to look like for that couple.
Of course. And in this particular thing, like when we mention relationships, this is a team event. This is teamwork, team goals. If this relationship is going to turn into a marriage or a partnership along, like you want people who are working towards those same goals, whether this is personal development or financial development. Goals as a conversation should 100% be a part of quality communication in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And also having just clarity on what's yours, what's mine, what's ours, while also, and really, I'm just going to say focus on like what's mine, right? Because we all want that sense of autonomy and then that independence, right? And having that like control over our own finances. So I say that because that is something that you would want to consider maybe, and maybe setting up like different accounts, maybe like different checking or different savings accounts where you have one together as a joint owner, if the timing is right and if it makes sense for your situation, of course, and then having separate ones where you have, let's say, a certain dollar amount that you have kind of like an allowance, if you will, for each person that you can use for whatever you'd like, no questions asked.
Okay, so it sounds like if we're talking about shared accounts, we're getting pretty serious in this relationship.
Yeah.
So we're definitely not in, say, the first month of dating at this point. That conversation of what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, what's ours is ours might be a little bit surfacey at
Right.
first. But once you start to get a little bit more serious and you start discussing having shared accounts as
Mhm.
a relationship goal, that becomes a little bit more intense of a conversation, especially if you're probably talking about pretty divergent numbers when it comes to
Mhm.
income. When it
Sure.
comes to expenses, especially as you had mentioned, if buying a house is on your list of goals, that's going to be a pretty big cost as far as planning ahead and making sure that both people are on board with that plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when you know it's a pretty, solid state that you're in when you're talking those kind of numbers and that kind of long-term goal and commitment, right? So another thing that would be important is to set up like regular meetings where you can both just like touch base, whether it's like on a weekly or a monthly base, but just being consistent with it, whatever it is that you choose. So that way you know that you're both on the right track. Would
I
be very
feel like
important.
part of this needs to come down to understanding your own personal relationship with money as
Mhm.
well as understanding your partner's relationship with money as well.
Mhm.
Our last spare change episode, we had Marcelo in, we were talking about budgeting and coming up with a plan where he is much more of the financial focused individual
Mhm.
in their relationship. So he did a lot of their budgeting work and knowing that like that was his strength and not
Sure.
hers, I think makes a big difference in these
Mhm.
conversations, especially if checking in regularly like that
Mhm.
is important, maybe because of your financial personality, your relationship with money, maybe it is once a week, maybe it's once a month.
Right. Yeah. And also, like you said, having like that person that has like that trait of just being like organized or just more like on, really good at budgeting, just maybe overseeing that shared account where maybe like all of the bills come out of. So that way, you know that everything's being paid on time and everything is being taken care of would be important. And just making sure that everything's on track too, right?
Exactly. If we're talking savings and those goals, you'd mentioned
Mhm.
accounts, maybe some allowances back and forth. Um, Saving on relationship events like
Mhm.
dates, having plans for that, knowing that
Mhm.
maybe it's not going to be a steak dinner every time we
Mhm.
go out and we're gonna maybe hit a matinee instead of the full priced evening uh, showing of a movie. What are some other things that people can be considering for making sure that they can maintain their relationship and dating as well as their financial goals?
Sure. So I would suggest maybe having like some sort of like a sub savings account to kind of keep that bucket separate where you know that those funds are allocated for that certain thing. When it comes to actually, I have some really good information here on just when it comes to like saving money on dates because we know it's very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's really expensive now, especially a nice steak dinner. So there's ways of finding, events that might be free or just finding, honestly, even just like going like on a hike or like on a picnic, something romantic, and finding ways to save money. Actually, something that I have found recently is just certain like influencers that have found on social media that actually specialize in finding certain
Oh,
deals.
really?
Yeah. So maybe that might be a good way, depending on what it is that what you like, your hobbies, that you can maybe start following and getting some tips on how to save. And actually, most recently, something that I've also found is a couple different apps that a lot of local restaurants use, by the way, where you can sign up for rewards programs
Okay.
just with your phone number and your name, of course. And then, depending on the places that you go, if you're a frequent visitor, then those rewards stack up and they add up, and you can get some nice discounts on your next visit. So,
Discounts are never a bad thing, especially when talking
mhm,
about saving.
mhm,
Also, a little creativity can go a long
sure.
ways. You don't need to pull out the pocketbook to impress on dates necessarily.
Hmm.
If you have a good plan, a good picnic, hike type of a
Hmm.
situation, that is almost more memorable than going out to the same restaurant again.
Yeah.
However, like you mentioned, that same restaurant might be a personal favorite, and the rewards that you could get there could also
Mhm.
help you save in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I like to mention is to maybe like check out your local chambers because a lot of the times they'll host free events for the community or just certain nonprofit organizations in your community that might offer access to like free movies in the park, free music festivals. I mean, There are so many endless opportunities out there. You
Live
just
at
have to know where to
five,
find them.
go get yourself
Hmm.
some free live music out,
Yeah.
enjoy the summer weather, a little bit of a picnic with the live music at that point in time. So yeah, there's a lot of options that are out there that can help assist with the savings, as far as making sure that works, and also then not, neglecting your relationship and just assuming that every night is going to be sitting at home watching TV, and not going out and enjoying each other's company.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know we started with talking about just like the things, like the to-do list, right? The to-dos on what to do when you start having those more serious conversations, and you know that you are in a good um, plan together to stay together. We talked about the things that you should focus on, the things you should do, but what we didn't touch on is the things that you shouldn't do.
Okay.
And the reason why, and we know that already a lot of statistics and research show that finances and money it's one of the biggest stressors, right?
It's not shocking.
And in a relationship, having two people in two different perspectives and money personalities, I mean, that just adds to it, right?
It's a very easy and
Hmm.
accessible conflict that you can get into.
As far as like the reasons why and the things that can get couples into trouble and just in general, are doing things like maybe hiding or lying
Hmm.
about, finances, or maybe like the debt that you might
Secret
have.
credit card.
Yep. Secret shopping sprees that
Hmm.
that all of a sudden you have all these packages showing up trying to hide them. That's, yeah, no good. So stay away from that. Don't do that. And another one too that could be really tricky is, to make all those purchases is racking up that credit card.
Hmm.
Because then what happens is if you don't pay off that balance and that interest starts accumulating, and before you know it, yeah,
Yeah, the
you're in
landslide
deep.
of debt, as well as the impact to your credit score, those type
Mhm.
of things, and especially if having to apply. And we'll go back to the house conversation. If you are both putting your name on that
Sure.
loan, then both people's credit is going to be pulled to check that. If one person's is
Mhm.
really bad, that may impact the couple's ability to move forward with those financial goals.
Correct. Yeah. And actually, you bring up a good point with that, because another thing that I have seen, and that I wanted to touch on is when it comes to not just like houses, but even like co signing on a credit card, maybe co signing on a vehicle or another kind
Hmm.
of loan, that's something that you really want to really consider and have just a really long, honest discussion with your partner, because what could happen there is, depending, let's just say you co-sign on a vehicle because your partner needs
Yep.
one, right? Well, that's, easily a 5 to 8 year commitment. What does that look like for you? Like, maybe are you looking to finance something yourself where that might then impact your debt to income ratio in the future? That's just one example. Beyond that, there's, well, what if it doesn't work out?
Exactly.
Unfortunately, then what happens? Well, now you have this financial commitment for 5 to 8 years,
And
that you
you're
have to get out of.
relying on your partner, or in this particular case, ex-partner, to
Mhm.
continue faithfully making those payments on
Right.
that loan. And if they don't, that's going to impact both of your credit score, and you may not even be in communication with them at that point in time.
Yep.
Making that type of a decision, that is a conversation about, say, 5 to 10 year goals in a
Mhm.
relationship. And of course, things happen.
Sure.
Goals are great, but it is one of those where you have to realize that when you get into this, you are going into it
Mhm.
together as a team, and that could negatively impact both of you in the long run.
Right. And not just on the lending side, too. Another thing is when it comes to accounts, too. One thing that I think people don't realize is that, let's say if you're on an account together and then for whatever reason the account goes negative and then it goes unpaid, then that can end up in a collections account where your name is tied to it. That's also another thing that doesn't get brought up as often, but we have seen it out there. So something we also wanted to mention, just to be cautious of that too, because depending on what that looks like, that could be something that down the road could end up in a negative balance. And a reason for something like that would be, as an example, a check that bounced
Hmm.
and that would took the account negative, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, that is owed now to the financial institution, and if it's not being paid, then what's going to happen? It's going to end up in collections.
I was going to say,
Yeah,
I could also see that coming about in an account structuring
sure.
situation where individuals aren't necessarily ready to do a shared savings account or checking account, but they're in a situation where they're in a shared living space. And
Mhm.
so they have their own separate accounts where I get my direct deposit into mine, you get yours into yours. And then we push money into this shared account to pay the rent, the utilities, Netflix. And then as the relationship itself has dissolved, but that
Mhm.
account is still there,
Right.
Netflix goes to pull that subscription because we didn't bother to cancel it, but
Mhm.
there's no money in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I've actually heard of someone doing recently, to kind of avoid that altogether is, let's say one partner, they'll use their income to pay for certain things like vacations, subscriptions, all the fun stuff. And then the other partner will use their accounts to pay like the main bills, maybe like splitting it in that way where it's still on accounts, it's separate, but then the subscriptions are just tied to that person where that person has the control then to just turn around and just cancel or do whatever they need to do.
Yep.
That could be a good way to avoid that altogether.
And I feel like,
It's a good
again,
way.
that comes back to that conversation and knowing yourself, your money personality, and how those
Sure.
things are going to work, and having that honest conversation in your relationship. Maybe it could be that the other person wants to build credit as well. And so just having the fun things in their name
Right.
doesn't work for their financial goals.
Yeah.
Or maybe that is the best way for a relationship to split those out, to make sure that the responsibility falls on the maybe more responsible individual to make sure
Hmm.
that those things get paid.
Yeah. And that's why another thing, is that having those regular meetings is important because things change and shift and seasons change, right? So, what if it's just a different time in their life and they're ready to go on to the next thing? Then that's a good time to address whatever change they need to make, and pivot on that pathway towards their goal that will get them there in a more efficient way.
Absolutely. And talking about the person who is planning and maybe doing the fun account, doing vacations and whatnot, as relationships progress, definitely things get more serious. People start to talk about marriage.
Yeah.
And start to plan those type of things. Planning a major event like that,
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure everybody out there knows that planning a wedding is not a cheap venue or venture, as well as planning a honeymoon. So these
Yeah.
are, again, those goal conversations of what can we afford. I
Mhm.
know maybe you have a storybook wedding in mind, but can we afford that? Maybe we
Mhm.
need to look at doing something different based on budgeting. Obviously, we all want to go spend
Mhm.
a month on a remote island beach for a honeymoon, but not everybody's
Mhm.
going to be able to afford that. And then, like, even if you could afford that, you can
Mhm.
probably find ways of saving more money on those things as well.
Yeah, and I think that beyond that, like having that conversation of like what's more important to one another, like is it, having all of our friends and family there? Are you maybe thinking, oh no, maybe it's more like we want it to be an intimate thing, so let's just do like a what do you call? Oh my goodness, a getaway.
Yeah, a
Vacation.
elope,
Yeah, you can
vacation,
elope,
a
vacation,
destination wedding.
destination wedding. There you go. Where it's something a little bit more intimate. Not necessarily about the money, but just more like of a preference of like who you want to be there, spending that time on your special day that you get one time.
Hmm.
So
Hopefully.
right, yeah, exactly. With that being the goal. So yeah.
And then again, after that is another great time to reassess, now that you are officially wed.
Hmm.
What is yours? What is mine? What is ours? Because this is another big change
Yeah.
in relationship status. You've gone from two people who are dating and might be sharing expenses and willing to cohabitate a savings account or a checking account in order to pay those bills. You're together, so it makes
Yep.
sense to do that. But now, as a married couple, there is a little bit of a difference as
Yeah.
far as taxes, as far
Hmm.
as income, as far as sharing those accounts. So this is, again, a great time to reevaluate that
Hmm.
mine, yours, and ours conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also depending on the state that you're living too, right? Then what does that dynamic look like? Like what is, all of a sudden you're married, like are you in a community state area where then it
Hmm.
would be just joint, depending on what that it looks like. And yeah, and just establishing new goals together now with, of course, it being, till death do us part mindset. And part of that also being a retirement plan and coming up with some sort of, if you don't have a plan already, having one in place. So that way you're both covered, come that age and hopefully sooner than later.
Hmm.
Another thing that's come up more recently is also looking into long-term care plans.
Yeah.
because we know the cost of that can be extensive.
If something happens, that
Mm-hmm.
is a major impact to any financial planning. The
Sure.
cost of long-term care is a big deal, as is life insurance.
Yep.
Because as tragic as that is, it can very well happen that people pass away long before they expect to from a tragic
Right.
incident or some other situation. And making sure that
Mm-hmm.
as you evaluate your financial goals, that both people are covered in those situations.
Right. Yeah. And depending on your situation too, it might be something that you maybe want to consult with an attorney, depending on like how you want to set things up for the future. If you have dependents or not, like how does that look like? And having just something in place for the future. So that way you're fully covered. And especially if you set up things like a life insurance plan, a long-term care plan sooner than later, you can save some dollars there.
Or
Yeah.
even if you had those things set up previously, maybe now is a time to go reevaluate those, update beneficiaries,
Sure. Yeah.
and make sure that, again, your relationship goals are being covered by those accounts and structures that you've already put in place for yourself.
Right. Yeah. So we know that part of, marriage and forming a family sometimes can involve kids. When it comes to making those plans and involving and having a child, come into the picture, that's a whole other,
It's going to be
conversation.
another landscape
Hmm.
changing scenario, especially for finances,
Yeah.
because I keep hearing people tell me kids are expensive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I honestly, I forget what they say now, what it costs to have, a child or an 18-year span. The last time I heard it, it was like a long time ago. And I want to say it was like maybe 500,000, but I'm sure it's
Yeah,
probably more.
I
I'm not
guarantee
sure.
it's
It's
above
up
that
there.
these days.
Yeah, but definitely one of those things that if you are wanting to start maybe like a plan for their college savings or trade school savings, a conversation that you want to have earlier than later, just because again, that could be a way to also save some money.
Yeah, we did a an episode with the Washington State University Tri-Cities Financial Aid Department talking all about those things. Obviously, planning ahead is a lot easier if you've got, say, 18 years worth of saving that you can do to help put that fund together. Is a lot better than, say, 18 months before tuition is
Yeah.
due. You're going to be able to accomplish a lot more. And in that conversation, we did talk about the federal aid benefits that are available out there and how everybody should be applying for FAFSA, as well as the fact that there are other state run
Hmm.
financial aid. And now, almost every state out there has some sort of a college savings plan that is
Hmm.
available for residents of their state and sometimes for
Hmm.
residents outside of their state as well.
Yeah, and those are all really good options to have. So definitely encourage you to look into your own state's plan to see what they have to offer and see if that's a good fit for you and your child. And also considering that they're all run so different.
Yeah.
So for like instance, in our state, the state of Washington, it's called the Walk It, so Washington 529 plan. There's a couple different options, I believe, but one of them is a prepaid college tuition plan, and it's designed to protect inflation for just the state of Washington.
Yeah, I believe that you basically buy
Mhm.
credits in that
Mhm.
particular plan, and those credits are then applied to full-time tuition at in-state universities. And
Mhm.
if you bought those credits for, say, $10,000, it doesn't matter if tuition has gone up to 20,000, that
Mhm.
credit is still worth tuition.
Right. Yeah. And depending on the plan too, that could be something that could be transferred on to maybe another family member. And I know that there's always, changes coming up. So that's also another thing is that once you have one set up, it's a good idea to just revisit it, during maybe
Yep.
once a year or whenever that is for you to see like what kind of new changes. Because I know that actually just a few years ago, Washington State had a big change where that the funds, like let's say your child decides not to go to college, then before it was you can transfer that on to a family member that wanted to use that for higher education, but there's was a change that it could now be used somehow towards like a retirement
Yep.
plan, but not sure the details on that, but encourage you to check it out because that's all good information and it's
Again, that comes down to
mhm,
that goals, those plans, having those conversations with your kid once they're old
mhm,
enough to understand, like, hey, we've been saving this for you to
yeah,
use for this, but if college isn't your life plan,
Mhm.
well, we can start to make moves with that to roll that into some sort of a retirement fund, or whatever
Mhm.
that plan has available based on your state. And again, like Candy said, go and look those up on your state. In the state of Washington, it's WAGET 529 plan, and I know Oregon has a very similar one. You can find those with a quick Google search, or go
Mhm.
back and listen to our financial aid episode. I believe that episode has some links to a number of those sites already on there. So you can go check those out from there.
Yeah, Scott, and I'm glad that you mentioned talking to your child about their future plans because there's actually a lot of research out there that shows that children actually adopt their money habits by the age of 3.
By the age of 3.
3, that is like mind blowing to me. And yeah, by age 7, they're already, they're set. A while ago, I heard about this awesome experiment where there was a team of people that, and this was all on delayed gratification called
Okay.
the marshmallow experiment, where there was a team of people that offered a child a marshmallow, and that they could have it now if they chose. But if they waited 15 minutes, then they could have more.
Okay.
And shockingly, what happened? A lot of them actually chose to take it right there and then.
Of course.
And that research team, of course, then followed those children through X amount of years to see how that impacted it and just found this like correlation there that was very interesting that actually played into later years in life, which was
Like just one marshmallow.
just one marshmallow, or you can have X amount more, if you just wait 15 minutes. And there's been more experiments out there like that, and actually some really fun educational videos since. But it's really powerful. But then again, just comes to prove like how young, children can
Mhm.
grasp those concepts and how they play into their later adult years.
So parents in this situation should be very mindful of how they approach money around their
Yes.
kids, because it is making an impact even when you don't think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And they pick up on those things and they watch you and they're curious, so it's also good to start introducing just certain responsibilities within reason too, right? And make sure
Yeah.
that that level of responsibility matches, their level of maturity and their age, but start introducing that little by little at a young age. And you'll be surprised how quickly
Yeah.
they'll pick up and remember and adopt those.
Build the solid foundation, and a good relationship with
Mhm.
money and finance early on. It'll help them out later in life.
Yeah.
Let's finish up with a couple of options to help out people with in their relationships with talking about money.
Yeah. So actually, there's a few ways to keep the harmony, in relationships when it comes to money. And it's just simply to, again, we've mentioned this a couple times before, just having those regular meetings,
Mhm.
because that comes with the communication and transparency of where you are, where you want to be, and also just assuring that you're heading in the right direction. Um, Creating those mutual goals as well as independent goals, I think, is also good too, because then with those independent goals, maybe your partner can help support
Yeah.
in some way. Yeah. And again, just keeping those conversations honest, especially when it comes to debt, those sort of things, because we don't want that to ever come up as a surprise, come time to buy a new car or make a large purchase, buy a boat. I don't know, whatever
Honey,
it might
I
be.
bought a timeshare
Yeah.
for $40,000, and now we're paying for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
those as a surprise, definitely a big stress inducing situation, especially if it flies in the face of other financial goals that you had talked about.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's not a good surprise for sure. And with that too, one thing we haven't touched on yet is creating an emergency fund.
Hmm.
Together could be something good for just whatever may come. It's just there. It gives you that peace of mind, and you know that it's accessible to you both, right? And lastly, another thing is because we know that navigating these conversations is not only difficult, but there's just so much information, so much knowledge out there where it could be sometimes a little overwhelming, right? Like,
Hmm.
where do you go? What do you do? What's accurate? What's inaccurate? So, with that, it's always good to have some help and support. And I just want to plug in there that if you ever need some one on one guidance, that we do offer free financial coaching services here at Hapo. And you can easily just jump onto our website and schedule a one on one consultation.
And I assume we could probably do this as a 2-on-1 conversation with both members coming in to have that chat too.
Right. And with the neutral party at that. So there we go.
Not everybody has all the knowledge that they need to make these financial decisions. Having somebody to talk to, a third party, even a neutral third party, like you mentioned, to throw a different viewpoint on that, or to bring the knowledge that maybe you and your partner don't have. There's nothing wrong with going out and finding the information to help support you and your financial goals and your relationship goals.
Yeah, just like with anything else, right? You find the expert. You need a haircut, you go find someone to cut your hair. If you need help with your finances, you find a financial coach. So
perfect. Yep. Candy, thank you very much for joining us today on Dollars and Cents Spare Change Edition.
Thank you.